Numbers chapter 18, verse 26. Moreover, you shall speak and say to the Levites, when you take from the people of Israel the tithe that I have given you from them for your inheritance, then you shall present a contribution from it to the Lord, a tithe of the tithe. Now, there is much debate among Christians over the principle of the tithe today. The questions that arise are many. Is the tithe biblical? Is it a New Testament concept? Are we to give a tenth? Are we to tithe off of our gross or our net? To what agency must we tithe? There are many misconceptions regarding the tithe today. Many incorrectly believe that the tithe began with the Mosaic Law. But the first mention of the tithe is from Abraham, who lived prior to the Mosaic Law. Abraham gave Melchizedek, a priest of God Most High, a tenth of everything. And later in Genesis, prior to the Mosaic Law, we find that Jacob committed a full tenth to God of everything that God would give him. Find that in Genesis chapter 28, verse 22. In the New Testament, the writer of Hebrews and Jesus refer to the tithe. The writer of Hebrews referred to it in recounting the interaction of Abraham and Melchizedek, and Jesus referred to it when he spoke of the Pharisees' failures to keep the weightier matters of the law. So is the tithe a New Testament concept? While there's significant disagreement between various Christians on this subject, none discredits the New Testament principle of sacrificial giving. It is my personal conviction that the tithe is a good starting point for sacrificial giving, that we are to give tithes and offerings. However, I also believe that each must give as God has purposed in his heart cheerfully and not under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now here the people of the congregation of Israel to give a tithe, that is a tenth, and this was necessary to provide for the ministry of the Levites. However, the tithe did not stop there. The Levites were to tithe to the Lord from the tithe that they received. And in verse 28 of Numbers chapter 18, we see the Levites' instructions for this. So you shall also present a contribution to the Lord from all your tithes, which you received from the people of Israel, and from it you shall give the Lord's contribution to Aaron the priest. Now this is the principle of the tithe of the tithe. And I believe that this principle of the tithe applies today. As a pastor who receives a substance from the tithes and offerings of the congregation, according to the approved budget of the church, I believe that I should give a tithe of my income as a minimum. And the church should also apply this same principle of the tithe by giving a tenth of the tithes and offerings of the congregation. The church, in this case, should give a tithe of the tithe by supporting missions work locally and throughout the world.